How would a brush with death shape your outlook to your life and career? On Zero Point Done, my conversations with peak professionals, this time I interview Hemanshu Parwani. HP is principal owner and CEO of Olson Kundig, an architecture design firm with award winning projects across all continents. He's also a mountain climber and outdoorsman with 5 of the 7 summits under his belt. We talk about his view of peak professionals as someone who climbs peaks habitually. I've known HP for 40 years, and some of my earliest memories of him are his running endless laps around the park. HP has always been relentless, pushing the limits, and I want to learn how that has shaped his life and career. Not all his climbs reach the summit. Sometimes the mountain lets you know who the boss is. We talk about his brush with death at the 2015 Everest climb and its aftermath, which was featured on Netflix's Aftershock. Following this episode, HP took a 2 year break. We ask what role the break has had in his life's trajectory. I ask HP about his respect for the mountain and risks and how he relates these to the work challenges that he takes on. His credo is believe in the process. It's something he said many times in our preparatory conversations. I want to learn his process and what role belief plays. HP is a person I've known and admired for a long time. I'm looking forward to this open conversation on Zero Point Done. Come join us.
Amazing conversations. I was able to see the first one. So great work.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to today's conversation with Hemanshu Parwani. This is Zero Point Done. My name is Gaurav Rastogi, and I began this series of conversations for a personal quest, which is simply I wanted to seek out peak professionals and learn their systems, their way of working with their mind, attention, and energy working together. And the reason for that is very simple. We admire excellent people. We look up to them and we hold them in high esteem, but we really want to become like them. We want to learn their systems and see what they're doing. And in that context, I'm really glad to welcome today's guest. Our guest today is Hemanshu Parwani, HP. HP is principal owner and CEO of Olson Kundig, an architecture design services company, which has award-winning projects all over the world. And HP is also an outdoorsman and a mountain climber, and he has 5 of the 7 summits under his belt. Now, I've known HP for more than 4 decades, and my earliest memories of HP are him running endless laps around the park. A very relentless person, and always pushing the limits, always testing the limits. And over 40 years, I've watched him progress, and I want to learn his system. How does it work for him? So, HP, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. It's a pleasure to be here. And I likewise admire what you've done, what you've achieved, having known you for the 40 plus years. So there is a mutual respect and appreciation.
Thank you, thank you. So, Himanshu, we want to get into a lot of things that I want to unpack with you. But first, tell us what Awesome Contact does. What is architecture design services?
We are a full services architecture firm, headquartered out of Seattle with presence in pretty much all across the globe. We have projects right now. We have locations, Seattle and New York. We are around 350 folks working on some of the amazing projects, amazing buildings, amazing landscapes all around the world.
Uh, all right. You're also a mountain climber, and you tell us about what is 7 summits. What is the hype about?
Why? Many decades ago, somebody decided to climb the highest peak on every continent, and that's how Seven Summits came about. And it happened to be somebody from Dallas, where I have lived for many years, a guy who at that point was an entrepreneur. He was pretty much getting to his retirement, and he was like, what are the challenges out there? And he came up with this whole idea of climbing the highest mountain on each continent, and that's the seven summits.
Let's begin all the way at the beginning.
Mhm.
How did you come to run an architecture design services company? Your background is a CPA and a finance guy.
Yeah, it is finance. And if I hadn't pursued finance, I would have pursued something in design. And I was at the crossroads. I had ended up doing finance, but I pretty much worked in architecture and design almost all my life, probably for the first few years being in finance. And after that, somehow made that leap of being in the design world. And I've just stayed true to it ever since.
Now, how did you get into climbing?
Wow, great question. Well, I've always been on the physical side of things. I was an athlete in school, running, playing sports, etc. Somehow it just came naturally to me, and it was somehow me channeling the energies in a direction that helped me create self beliefs and work with amazing, outstanding folks. And growing up as a kid, I never realized the power of the physicality, but over the years, as I have continued to pursue it, I find it that whole physical space to be highly meditative for me. And I was sitting many years ago and watching Everest documentary, and then suddenly I'm like, why not me? And that's how I started. And then I've often spoken to a lot of friends, colleagues in the profession, etc., and they always say, "Oh, you're climbing a mountain," and I say, "Anybody can go and climb a mountain. There's nothing special about me. You just have to dedicate yourself to it and pursue it as, however, as a hobby or as a goal or whatever." And for me, it's more of a hobby. Seven summits is fine. Even if they were not there, I'll probably be doing something which is physical, climbing, running, and whatnot. Yeah, that in a nutshell is kind of my transition from being the early physical kid to climbing.
All right, let's unpack this one summit at a time. What does it take to climb a summit? What is the effort and preparation required to do that?
I would say each mountain is different. It's different geography, different locations, and different approach. So it can range from 3 months to 9 months, depending on the mountain. The preparation is, I would say, equal parts physical, equal parts mental. Uh, but I tend to focus more on the mental part because that's what will, that's one thing that will carry you through when you're on the mountain. You cannot envision everything that can happen. And I often say being comfortable. I want to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And in order to condition my mind, I remember as I was training for my first Everest climb, I would, we were in a 25-story building at my work. And at the end of the day, I would go up and down the stairs just for my cardio, etc. But that was the easy part, I would say. The difficult part was, which I chose, was that I was going to do that wearing a suit and not, yes, that's exactly the reaction I got from everybody. And I said, I'm trying to condition my mind because that's the most uncomfortable thing to do. Doing that wearing a suit. Anybody, once you're in your gym shorts, etc., sneakers, etc., sure, you're already in a comfortable space. But doing this the way I was doing, it was more about me conditioning my mind that how I feel uncomfortable and getting used to that.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. So you're preparing yourself mentally by putting yourself into this uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
And then when you go to book a summit climb, how many months ahead are you planning?
it's anywhere between 6 to 9 months. Sometimes it's a year ahead. I'm thinking like, okay, I'll do it because to get into the space of physical, mental conditioning and getting there, it just takes its effort. And given that there is work, there's family, there's everything, there are different pulls on your time, that duration gets a little bit extended for me.
Interesting. And you said you're using these summits as a way of decluttering your mind and finding clarity. Talk about that experience.
Oftentimes, folks climb because they want to get the summit. Sure, summit is great, but I see summit as a byproduct of everything else that I do. And I've often said we probably spend anywhere between 5 to 30 minutes max at the summit. The expedition is 2 months long in some instances. So summit is a microcosm of everything else that happens. And for me, that space is highly meditative because it's an excellent example of delegating. Your body is doing one element, your mind is separating itself. So I find that a unique zone to be where just a separation, and it's like a out of body experience when you don't even realize what your body is doing because it's been trained, etc., to do certain things, but your mind is thinking something else. And that's the space that I enjoy. And that's to me is highly meditative because at that point, I'm not thinking about anything else as in, oh, I've got to reply to an email, I have to be there, etc. It's about there's the physicality aspect. The mind is probably compartmentalizing itself and doing one element which is focused on that. But the other element, there is just like empty space, and I just enjoy that empty space in my mind where I could be thinking anything. Folks talk about blue sky thinking.
Hmm.
You're literally in the blue skies doing the blue sky thinking. Uh, and that's a zone. And that's the reason I kind of climb. It's not so much the summits. I've climbed for many years now, and many instances I've turned around even without going for the summit because I've just enjoyed my journey. And to me, that's really important is to enjoy what you're doing. And even in my work, I share the wisdom that I've gained from climbing. And I give an example. I was doing a climb where I was sharing a tent with another climber for 4 weeks. And somehow we just didn't get along. We didn't hit it off. And to me, that was a great learning experience where I was in this close confines of a small tent, which is probably 5 by 6 or five, and sharing space with somebody where somehow, for whatever reason, we are not aligned, but we were aligned on the purpose, which was the climb. And to me,
Hmm.
that was a really interesting lesson of existing in a space where the ultimate experience, ultimate goal is aligned. We may not agree on 1,000 other things, but how do we calibrate and yet be tied together on the rope, forgetting everything else that we've experienced during the day? But when we are on the rope, when we are clipped on, then pretty much there is a immediate trust because our purposes are aligned.
Hmm.
Because I know if I'm going to fall, he's going to catch me. And if he's going to fall, I'm going to catch him. It's like when you clip on the rope, somehow a switch goes on. There is a trust that's there that the person, I may not get along with that person who is behind me or ahead of me, but when he or I experience a fall, we'll be there for each other.
Now, when you come back to office, the first question is, how do you make time for these? Do you not feel guilt at leaving the office and all your emails and unread stuff and heading off into the mountains?
Yes and no. I've tried to do it two ways. I've done some climbs where I've been totally switched off, and there have been other climbs where I've been connected, but responding to emails. I joke with friends. I probably had had an office at the highest altitude, and I was communicating on Everest with office. So that that happens with life as well. We have family, we have other obligations and things. And devoting time, giving time for that is important. But then there is kind of the me time where I do a lot of the thinking and coming back to work. It's not so much about the time that I was away from the office, but what thoughts I come back to the office after my climb. Because to me, that's key. And oftentimes folks joke, okay, your HP is gone for a climb. Now he's back. And the first thing, all right, tell us, what did you think on the climb?
How do you take notes? Do you carry a diary?
I do carry a diary. I write, uh, uh, and these days, phone is easy. I'll be kind of writing and sketching and notes stuff as I think about ideas, etc. Because I want to hold on to those moments that kind of it's literally a moment of something that will a spark will come as you're kind of in empty space, and I'll be like, okay, I need to think about it when I get to a place where I can co- rationalize my thoughts and build on that. But yes, there are often notes, scribbles, cryptic notes.
So let me understand this. You've gone on a mission which involves heading up to a peak. This could be weeks of climbing. And you're saying the body and mind separate at this point where the body is doing the climbing, the mind is now has entered this endless space in all directions. And thoughts freely come to you that you then are able to write down and think about. Is that the process?
Yeah, that is my that's part of the process. There is the process of you talked about the relentlessness. Those are all things. I think it's a puzzle where all these different components come together, but the free thinking happens in that space.
Are you trying to think or just thoughts just come to you?
I'm not trying to think because I'm not going with an agenda that I have to think about this. And that's the best part, which I enjoy, where there is no agenda when I'm in that space. I'm not thinking about work. It could be ideas about anything, about my self growth, ideas about other individuals that I work with, or family, or the world in general. It's an amazing space.
Let's talk about space. What is the role that space plays in this? Because you're at a place where your sense of space is different from how you are right now at an office where it's constrained. How does it feel? Is that experienced differently?
Yes, and space is all relative. I've climbed certain peaks, and you show up in the Himalayas and you stand there, and then you just look at the mountain, and then you're like, wow, how insignificant we are. It just hits you so hard, and how small we are in the grand scheme of things. And given that I work in design and in architecture, space is all we deal with and talk about all day. Physical space and mental space are very less is understood of that. That's even I am probably scratching the surface here on both on both the realms. Even, and probably the third realm I would say is our physicality. I have seen myself, I've seen others go beyond what they thought they were physically capable of. Yeah, it's interesting to see
Hmm,
how much more we are as human beings are capable of than what we think.
interesting. Now, tell me about challenges. When did you realize that you like taking challenges, like you say, wearing a suit and climbing up the stairs? At what point in your life did you realize that this is something that you enjoy doing?
Ah, I mean, I guess from early on, as you've seen me run around as a kid, I think that was probably coming from that drive for relentlessness. I use that word very often, and both in work and in personal, where I'll keep going at a problem probably 10 different ways in trying to figure it out. I don't give up easily. And and probably the metaphor that I usually refer to is think about water. It'll find a way through anything and everything.
Mhm.
And I try and model myself in that thought process. Like, sure, there are so many roadblocks. Probably there's one way to get in, and why not explore that? So keep exploring. That's the way
Mm.
I think, and that's how I try to take on challenges, which is about figuring it out.
I-
Uh, If
Is there
everything
work
was
example?
made available,
Is
sorry,
there
go
a
ahead.
work example of challenges that you've decided to take on and just kept hammering away at it?
Oh, that happens almost on a daily basis. We are faced with challenges of working in different geographies, never heard of places that get to, and where probably very few architects or design firms have been, and trying to figure out how will we work there, how will we engage in that space. So it's on a daily basis. It's even working with folks. The example I shared earlier about working with a teammate, trying to figure it out. Okay, we may not align on 50 different things, but we'll align on one thing.
Climbing a summit requires rethinking your attitude to risk. How have you evolved in your attitude toward risk itself?
Ah, that's a great question and a very deep question because if you read about climbing, you'll hear about something called summit fever, which is which is you get so carried away with getting to the summit that you
Mm.
ignore the warning signs, the risks, etc. And there are so many documented cases of that. And it's a known thing. A classic one is Into Thin Air,
Mm. Mm.
1996.
Mm.
They got carried away with summit fever and paid a heavy price. So there is a risk element of that.
Mm.
And as I've been climbing, there are two things. I don't want to be stupid about risk. Appreciate the risk that you're taking and be
Mm.
smart about it. Can you eliminate every risk? Probably not. It's impossible. Are you careful about everything that you do? Are you showing up prepared? Are
Mm.
you, and that's a common thing. Everest is probably on a bucket list of millions of folks, and probably, uh, I don't know, a lot of folks show up not prepared for the mountain.
Mm.
And so I always look at risk as an have I done everything that I can do to mitigate that? And I've had experiences, quite a few, as I shared with you previously at 2015. Nature is also powerful. Being up on the mountain at Camp 2 and experiencing a nearly 8.0 magnitude earthquake, nothing could have prepared me for that. And that was something I wasn't prepared for. And that was a really interesting moment for
Mm.
me personally, experiencing death real time coming towards you and knowing you can't do anything.
I'd like to stop you. Let's take all the way back. Let's carry
Okay,
everyone along with this. So you're describing your 2015 Everest climb.
right.
Could you tell us what happened?
During the climb, I was at Camp 2, which is around 21,500 feet, and there was a earthquake in Nepal, a significantly huge earthquake. Like I said, 8.0 earthquake, and thousands of people died. And on top of the mountain, experiencing this was a different experience for me because yeah, I've experienced earthquakes, but more firmer ground, not on a mountain. And as we were s- pitched in the middle of the glacier on the mountain, as the earthquake happened, seeing avalanches rush towards you was a moment where I accepted that as a reality. That's going to happen because there's no way to outrun them and there's no place to outrun when you are at that height. And I'm lucky to be alive.
How
Uh,
long are you seeing the avalanche head toward you?
it it's just a matter of seconds, probably 15, 20 seconds.
And it's
And
gaining momentum as it's coming down?
yeah, avalanches tend to move pretty rapidly. They're often like 100 plus miles, 100 to 150 miles an hour. They are just moving
Mm.
super quickly. And I was with my Sherpa at that time, and he said, turn on your avalanche beacon and just be in a brace position. Nothing you can do about it. We're not going to go anywhere, but just hope for the best.
And what does the beacon do? It lets people know, or like it's a radio signal or a light?
It's a radio signal basically when they're trying to find for you and you're buried in tons of snow for them to locate you so that they can dig. But rarely have folks been found because of an avalanche. It does help, but depending on the severity of the avalanche and where you end up by the luck of the draw, you may be found.
So what are you thinking in this moment?
I'm thinking my immediate reaction was, okay, it's going to happen. I accept death. I got to that fairly quickly because this thing was avalanche was approaching pretty rapidly. And, and I said, it's going to happen. And somehow it was a very peaceful state for me where I'm like, if once I've accepted that, there was nothing to think about. And I was just at peace. I couldn't think of, oh, I have to do this. In the next 10 seconds, do I need to call someone? It was nothing like that or do anything. I was like accepting the reality of it was a very, I would say, a life changing experience.
Mm.
And coming back, I had a different perspective of life. I was more keen on the why of it versus just going through my day every day. And um, and I took a 2 year sabbatical after that from my
But
work.
how did you survive this? So the avalanche comes to you, but it doesn't actually hit your team, or what happened?
What? So this is where I always talk about the team having the right team, and the guide I was climbing with, he, he has summited Everest 16 times and been on the mountain 30 years. Until last year, held the record for the most summits of Everest outside of a non-Sherpa.
Mm.
And so when we were pitching our tents, we come up after a long climb to camp, and he said, I think we should move our tents to the middle of the glacier. And we were all tired. We were all cribbing. Oh, we just came after 8, 9 hours of climbing, and now we have to remove all the tents and pitch them. But we said, fine. He knows the mountain better than I do. So he said it, we did it. And we were so glad we did it because had we not done that, I mean, our tents would have been gone. We would have been gone because the avalanche somehow split somewhere and passed us by.
Wow. So if you hadn't moved your tents,
Mm.
you would definitely be under.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so then, are you locked here? How are you rescued? How's everyone?
Yeah. We were locked in because the route was completely gone and there were aftershocks happening. And the way that the topography of the mountain is, you have to go through an ice fall to come to the base camp. And ice fall is nothing but just large, huge blocks of ice the size of a 10-story building. And they were completely unstable. And even when you were on the glacier, you can feel the glacier kind of move. And if it were to move probably a few more feet, it would have just collapsed on itself going
Mm.
down. Yeah, we were rescued via helicopter after 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah.
During that time, was there any contact with the family and other people?
No, I didn't have a direct contact. We were able to get a message out via sat phone to the guiding company to say, "Hey, we are safe right now,
Mm.
and but we don't know how will we get out of here." Because in the meanwhile, on our radios, we had heard that the avalanches had hit the base camp also,
Mm.
and that's where the most deaths happened, at the base camp. When I came back to the base camp, I looked at my tent. It had been crushed. Had I been in my tent, I would have been crushed too. It was literally like from a regular tent, it was compressed to a 2-inch thick piece of fabric.
Oh my- So an ordinary person would forswear away from ever climbing again. So how have you done after that event?
I have continued to climb. I went back again in 2021 to climb Everest. I've climbed other places after that. And uh, again, after that experience, the perspective was different. It was about the why, the purpose, the quality time, both with my family and etc. And making the moments count was the thing. And yet I have enjoyed that whole physical, spiritual experiences of climbing, which I continue to do even now. And probably having seen death so closely, probably there is no this thing. If I were to die, I were to die. There's no fear of it.
So you took a career break, you spent time with family. Did you come back to work the same person that went in? How have you changed?
Oh, I came back much different. I think previously this was, I just felt, now that I reflect on it, it just felt like I was on a treadmill, constantly running. I mean, at work and everything. And to me, now I feel that the life was just passing us by because everything was taking up. My mind was cluttered with things, and now I experience differently. And even the 2 years, probably I say that those 2 years were the best years of my life. The time I spent with my family, with my kids, and making those moments, I did things that my younger kid at that time was 5, 6,
Mm.
and the stuff that I did with him. Now he's 16 and he still remembers the things that we did. And I was like, wow, that's the best time I had in my life.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Because there was more, for me, it was more about the meaningfulness of that time versus just spending time.
Mm. So how do you experience time now? How do you were talking about how you were on a treadmill always doing things. Is that how's your attitude to your work day, your schedule now?
I, I, I am, I tend to be extremely, I keep my day fairly filled up with things. And when I say filled up, I mean, it's always meaningful. Work takes its place. I have my own place. And I still tend to be very relentless. There is an element of I am doing a lot of things, but at the same time, there is more calmness and peacefulness with regards to everything that I do.
Mm.
Previously, trying to do 5 different things, and all 5 things were muddied together, and I'll still be doing the 5 things, but each function, each space has its own time, and I enjoy each one of those. Coming to work, I joke with my colleagues like every day I come in, it's like the first day I walked into the office. I just feel the very same level of energy, excitement of coming to work every day.
Every day is like the first day of work. That's amazing.
Every day is the first day of work.
Now, Himanshu, when we were prepping, you talked a lot about believe in the process.
Yes.
Talk about that. What do you mean by believe in the process?
The way I define my process, which is establishing the why first, that's really important for me. Why am I doing anything? And establishing that goes a long way. That sets the tone for how I'm going to go about it.
Mhm.
Uh, so with that, with the why, who are the people that I'm surrounded with? There is so much positivity, energy, etc. Work with the people that enjoy, who are aligned on that why, on the purpose, and then it's not work. Everybody's having fun. Everybody's coming in because they have understood the why.
Mm.
And once you understand it, only then you're going to believe in it. So it's really important for folks to understand what that is. Then the other thing that I I always factor in my process is, am I doing my damnness best? Can
Mm.
I do any better? And I'm often reminded of a movie which was okay. It's called Fighting the Giants.
Mhm.
And there was a profound scene in that movie about this coach and a high school football player, and he says, "Give me your best." And the guy says, "Sure, I can do 20 yards on the football field." And he challenges him further and further. The guy crosses the entire football field blindfolded, carrying a person on his back, and that was his best. And he even didn't know what was his best. So
Mm.
I always think, I don't know if I've hit my best yet. What's my best is it every day changes, it evolves. You grow every day, and have I done my best?
So you see, you're always testing your own limits.
Yes.
See where the edge is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I teach physical postural yoga classes, the phrase we use is push but don't break. So always test
Mhm.
the limits of how where you can take your posture, but don't
Right.
break because then you're going to
Uh-huh. Yep.
class will be a pain in the neck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So that's interesting. So how does that apply to?
And there's one more part to
Yeah.
my process,
Yes.
which is, how do we define success? And because everything is a journey, you start with the why and what you're trying to go towards, and defining success is relative. Someday it can be about winning a particular project, or successfully delivering a project, or being in a certain geography, doing something from a work or in personal spaces, a certain thing. Or the success could be defined as, did I enjoy that process? Did I get what I wanted out of it? Aside from, let's say, the summit. And to me, that's more important. I remember the climbs where where I got so much more out of it than the summit.
And just so I understand, this is the opposite of summit fever. You're saying people that are obsessed with the
Yeah.
summit tend to
Mhm.
lose track of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was sharing, Rainier is right in our backyard, literally in Seattle. And I have turned around, it's 14,400 feet, but I've turned around 13.5, 13.7. I'm probably an hour from the summit. I've turned around, and my wife said, "What? You didn't go for the summit?" I'm like, "No, I enjoyed what I was doing. Summit wouldn't have added any more to my enjoyment." And so I enjoyed what I was doing, and I was done. And so I'm back.
Very interesting. How do you? I'm just going through my list. Did the career break make a difference to your sense of the trajectory of your life and your career?
Yes, it did because it was a very important pause and reflect moment for me as to what I wanted to do with my life and how I wanted to career. Yeah, how do I shape my career? It was more about the kind of work that I wanted to do. Careers are defined by many things, and I wanted to enjoy and have this hold on to this feeling of having the excitement of coming to work, be in a place where I enjoy being around other folks that I work with on a daily basis. So that's what I wanted to seek. And again, as I said, summits, titles, etc., are a byproduct of you could be having fun or enjoying. You don't have to be a CEO of a company. You could be doing doing your damnedest best, enjoying everything. Again, all the other things are a byproduct, is the way I see
Yeah. Now, you told me you added two more endpoints to your seven summits. Talk about that.
it. Yeah. Again, I'll go back to the word relentless. And so after seven summits, my intent, or not after, while I'm doing the seven summits, I've added going to the two poles as part of my journey, which is going to the South Pole and North Pole. Again, they will, um, from whatever I've seen, a- again, I respect nature and seeing the immense power of nature, etc. It gives me an opportunity to see that towards the South Pole, you don't see a human being for probably thousands and thousands of miles. And to go, you have to ski there, carrying a sled, and you ski to that. It's physically taxing, enduring. But there is, I'm just imagining surrounded by the white space and
Hmm.
having the white space in my mind as well.
Amazing. Now, you're describing these climbs, these summits. It's partly physical preparation, mostly mental preparation. Is the physical preparation that any of us could do?
I say anybody can climb. Yes. Yes. It's a process to that as well. It takes time and you have to be at it. The discipline. One another element in my process is the discipline.
Talk about your discipline. What's your, is it on a daily basis or an annual basis that you're looking at yourself as a disciplined person?
I look at it on a daily basis. And again, for example, when I'm training, that's where discipline helps carry through some days where I try to train sometimes in the early morning, sometimes late at night, depending on how my workday is going. And there are days when just don't feel like it. And that's where I bring in my discipline of I have to do it. I may not do my whole circuit of, let's say, if it's an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, I'll still go out and do for an hour at least. And again, that's to my previous comment about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. There will be days when you just don't feel like doing it. And, but you, if you have the discipline, you do it. And I'll share on my last Everest climb on one of my summit rotations, which is not summit rotation, acclimatization rotation, where you go from one camp to the other and then come back. Going from camp one to camp two, I was just not feeling it. I was just not feeling like, ah, like an off day. And then I said, you know what? Okay, I'll break this down into smaller chunks. I'm going to walk 50. I'll just take 50 steps. And then I would do that and then reset the counter. I'll do another 50 steps. And I kept doing that the entire way. I went from camp one to camp two, counting 50 steps at a time. In my mind, I was literally counting one step, two step, three step, four step. It was an off day, and we all have off days. But that's where that whole idea of being disciplined carries the day.
I love that because in my own work habits, discipline plays a very important role. And I think of it as empty cycles. Some days when you're not feeling it, you still do the whole thing, just an empty cycle. It won't be the whole thing, but you'll
Right.
still go through the motions.
Yes.
And it turns out I find that momentum often takes, so like you were describing, you do
Yeah.
50 steps. All right, maybe I got another 50 steps in me. Let me do that one.
Mhm.
And then eventually momentum takes over and
Yeah.
you finish. I'm trying to build a focus and finish system for
Mhm.
professionals.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that I'm building into it, which is look, one is time box. Just give it time. You're not trying to finish everything. Just make
Right.
time for it
Yep.
and chip away at it. You don't need to finish it this round. Just come back another hour, do
Mhm.
some more next time,
Yep.
and eventually you'll be done. It
Yep.
beats, like you were saying, if you're trying to do this summit rotation and you decide not to do it that day, you did nothing that day. Versus,
Absolutely.
you know,
Doing every incremental step. It's one step at a time. That's the way. That's how we climb mountains. All you're trying to focus on is just the next step, just the next step. Because you can have a grand scheme. Oh, I'm going to take this route. Just don't know what the conditions are going to be as you keep climbing the mountain, the turns, the wind, the weather, even loose rock. There are 50 things that could go wrong. But doing that one step carries the day.
uh, finally, yeah, SP, I want to ask you, you talked a lot about respect for forces of nature. It seemed from the outside, if you're a summit climber, you're essentially exhibiting dominance over nature. But that's not what I'm sensing at all from your comments. Talk
Absolutely
about that.
not. Absolutely not. Again, I I always say respect the mountain because oftentimes my friends joke, "Oh, just because you've done Everest, here's a 8,000 feet hike in the Colorado. Oh, that's a cakewalk." I'm like, "No, it's not a cakewalk. Just because I've done one thing doesn't mean anything when you show up. It's a different mountain. It's a different day, different dynamics, and respect the nature." And I've seen it firsthand. Folks die at 10, 12,000 feet climbing. And I've seen people die on a 29,000 foot Everest. I respect every mountain. Even if it's a hike, I'm like, respect what's there. You- yeah, like I said, we are so insignificant in the grand scheme of things.
When you started climbing, you were climbing to fundraise. Are you still doing that?
I still do that. Yes.
Talk
Yep.
more about that.
I often say, and channel your passion into compassion. Climbing
Mm.
was my passion, but it's about how do I channel that passion into doing something that can help and benefit others. And there are some causes that are dear to my heart, and I've done that, and I continue to raise funds for that. And to your earlier question about can anyone climb or do anything, and I say find your Everest always. Like it could be anything. It doesn't have to be about climbing Everest. It could be about doing anything. It's work or physical or personal. I just find your own Everest.
Fantastic.
So, so
I've always enjoyed hearing all your exploits, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I've taken pages after pages of notes. I appreciate that you took time out, and
pleasure's mine.
I'm now very keen to follow your summits. And if there are baby summits you're climbing, and you want people to know, I'd love to join one of yours.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to walk. One of my favorite mountain is Kilimanjaro, and it has a hike which is called the Coca-Cola hike, where because they have Coca-Cola huts all along the way. But but climb anything or do anything physical. I'd be happy to have you. It'll be a great experience. We could go. You're in California. Could be in the Yosemites and doing something.
I'd look forward to it. Actually,
Pleasure.
thank you very much. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for sharing your insights. And thanks for being here today. And thanks also for being patient at the beginning when we were
Oh,
dealing
no.
with
Hey, that's another example. Things will go wrong.
I saw you
All
were
right.
incredibly patient. So thank you for doing that. Great
Pleasure.
example.
It was great talking to you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks
Have a
everyone.
great
Bye
day.
bye.
Bye bye.